Okay, well, good afternoon to everyone who's joining us either live at the Which School Show, which is the UAE's first ever virtual school show, or maybe you're watching this at a later date too. So, welcome from wherever you are. For our next panel discussion, we have a really big topic in education, and that is curriculum. Obviously, this is a huge factor when it comes to choosing a school for your child. And there is a whole wealth of different curricula that's offered at schools here in the UAE. So how do you know which is the right curriculum for your child and which will take them on that right path towards either university or the career of their choice? So our panel of experts are here today to explain the differences and the similarities between the different curricula that are offered here, so that hopefully then you can use that to help make the right choice of school for your child today or over the next year. Then we start by introducing myself. I'm Carly Allen. I'm the international editor at Which School Advisor. And I'm joined by a panel of education experts from schools across Dubai, and they're representing the three main choices of curricula that are offered here in the UAE. And that is the UK National Curriculum, the International Baccalaureate Programme, also known as the IB, and the US Curriculum. So let me introduce, I have David Hudson, the head of school at Dwight School. Hello, David. Oh, David, I'm just going to unmute you. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, great to see you.
Super, brilliant. Fiona Cotton, the principal at Heartland International School. Welcome, Fiona.
Afternoon, everyone.
Yannicka Arness, the school director at Universal American School. Hello, Yannicka.
Hello, pleased to be here with you all.
Super. Simon Herbert, the head of school and CEO at GEMS International School. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Carly.
And also we're joined by Campbell Douglas, the principal and CEO at GEMS Wellington Academy, Al Khail. Welcome, Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Super. It's lovely to have you all together and representing all the different curricula, I think, at the schools. And I think, what we aim to do then is give parents some really interesting information and background to, what they can expect from the schools here in the UAE. So while the UK curriculum is widely offered in the UAE, there's also a significant number of schools also offering the IB program and the US system, which I referred to before. And each curriculum will prepare students or your child for university and beyond. But it's the teaching methods, the assessment and the content that are similar in some areas and very different in others. And that's what I think, parents really need to get an understanding of and a grasp of when they're deciding which might be the right for their child or their family. So let's start by just briefly summing up the curricula that's offered by each of the schools that are represented today and what qualifications they may work towards. So Fiona, obviously Heartland International School, that's obviously UK national curriculum. Could you start by just giving us an overview, particularly looking at the early years, going into the early sort of primary years and what that involves with the UK curriculum?
UK curriculum, interestingly, it is actually officially the national curriculum for England. And I think that internationally we tend to speak about UK curriculum, but we are talking about something that's actually been around since the 1940s. So it's a very old curriculum in terms of its establishment. I think the interesting thing about it is that particularly over the last 20 years, at sporadic intervals throughout, it's evolved into something that's very, very different than it first was. It's broken down into a variety of what we call key stages, and the key stages are age related. So children tend to start school around 3.5, and through from 3 till 5 or close on to 5, you will have what's called foundation stage. So very equivalent to KG that you might find in different types of systems. We then go into key stage 1, which is years 1 and 2, key stage 2, which takes you up to the end of primary school, aged around about 10.5, 11, and then aged 11 to 15, key stage 3, 15 and 16, key stage 4, and 16 to 18, then you have post-16 curriculum. So it follows like many other schools do. It just has names in terms of those key stages. And I think often in education, we're very good at putting acronyms and putting names to things, which can put barriers in front of us with parents. But suffice to say, it's an all through, as you might say, K to 12 or aged 3.5 to aged 18 curriculum. And it follows very traditional subjects, I suppose, in terms of its overarching content. but its approach has very much been adapted to meet the needs of 21st century learners and the skills that the World Economic Forum and others have identified as being necessary for learners so that they can embrace and move on through life.
That's it. And I think it's like, all of these curriculums and, some, obviously all having a history, but they obviously all have to adapt with the time, which is, what I think we're seeing in all programs in the UK system as well. Campbell, you're obviously representing GEMS Volunteering Academy Archael, and that's also a UK curriculum school. Is there anything else you would like to add just to sort of give us an idea of this system of teaching?
No, I think Fiona's done a great job there, especially to the background. So thank you, Fiona. Just to add on, obviously, in terms of the through school, being from Key Stage 1 right through to Year 13, we obviously offer the GCSEs as well. So heading into Year 10 and 11 for those qualifications, and then moving through into post 16 with the A levels and at our school BTECs as well, a wide range of BTECs. So just add that on to what Fiona has said. Yeah, so that the qualifications are there in terms of GCSEs and the A levels also.
That's it. And I think it's interesting for parents to understand those qualifications, which I think, many people will they'll recognize the A levels, the GCSEs, and then to know that there's also the vocational aspect, which, we'll hopefully get to discuss a little bit more further. So David, obviously at Dwight School, that's an IB school. How is that different to the UK or the US system? And can you sort of give us a brief overview to understand the IB program?
Yes, of course. So we're an authorized IB World School, and also a through school, so pre-K through to grade 12. The International Baccalaureate is very, very international in its nature and context. It very much focuses on skills acquisition, competencies, preparing students for life beyond the school and even life beyond university. And it looks at a number of global contexts and really tries to develop the inquiry aspect of learning. It's very much a student-led program, and it's split into 3 distinct programs. The primary years program will take our students right through to grade 5, and then the middle years program will take our students to grade 10, 15, 16 years of age, and then the prestigious diploma program, pre-university program, grades 11 and 12, where the examinations kick in and there's lots of internal assessment ready to prepare our students for life at university and beyond. And that's a 2-year rigorous program. Yes, so there are 3 distinct programs, pre-K through to grade 12, with really much an international global context.
Yes, yeah. And Simon, obviously another IB school, for GEMS International School. Do you have anything else that you'd want to add that, maybe David hasn't covered or has covered? I mean, it was a very thorough answer, so thank you, David.
No, I think David's put it very well, just to say that the IB now teaches over 1 million students around the world, 5,000 schools, and it is an international education for international parents. I mean, that's the key thing. It's not a national defined unilateral education. It is international. And what comes with that are a series of skills as well, approaches to learning, they call them, and a values-led learner profile for risk-taking, global-mindedness. Approaches to learning include things like thinking skills and research skills. So as David said, learning for life, yes, I think is what the IB is all about as well.
Okay, so it's interesting to start to get an idea of the different approaches taken by these 2 programs. And last but certainly not least, Yannicka, Universal American School, as you would imagine with the American title, you're offering a US system, and I know you obviously include as well in that the IB program at the end, a choice of that. But can you give us an idea about the US system?
Yes, absolutely. And you're quite right. So we are an American school as well as an IB World School. And as you rightly said, Universal American School offers the IB diploma, but also the PYP, in fact, so the primary years program. So as another K-12 school in the UAE, in this panel, we offer another curriculum which is very widely spread globally, of course, the American education. A little bit to what Fiona said about the misconception about referring to the UK curriculum. The American curriculum is in a way suffers from maybe a similar kind of connotation. There is no such thing specifically as the American curriculum, but because of course with the federal system, each state has a different curriculum. However, an American international curriculum standard was established several years ago, and I'm sure that many of our listeners might be familiar with the Common Core. So if they're familiar with American education, Common Core might be something that resonates, because it is a standards-based approach to American education systems. And there is an international element of Common Core called AERO. So the American education reaches out. It was a project launched almost 20 years ago and really brings American education to the international scene. So at Universal American School, from pre-K all the way through to grade 12, our standards are based on the AERO standards. So in our PYP and in our DP, which are then the IB frameworks that we also have at Universal American School, we benchmark that against the AERO standards, so that there, you know how the IB provides a framework where really you can use the framework in different curricular contexts. And being an American school in the UAE, we use the PYP framework in parallel with the AERO standards. So our students, starting young, they follow an American international curriculum. When they come to middle school, they can make a choice, and they can choose to go either in a US high school direction, or they can choose to pursue the IB diploma. And if they choose the American high school direction, it's important to look at a 4-year continuum. So from grade 9, 10, 11, 12 will lead to an American high school graduation. And within there, we also have the offering of various AP courses. So advanced placement, which are higher credit level courses well, I was almost going to say for American entry, of course not for international entry requirements, but AP courses give additional value.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think what comes across is, that there's lots of different choices and there's lots of different pathways. And I think, wherever the curriculum originates from, particularly now in this international context, they are going to be adapted slightly for the, for the expat students or the location that they're being taught in as well. So I think that really, starts to come across once parents start to look at the curriculum. And I think it's important, like, you started to say these kind of the phrases like Common Core or foundation stage or the primary years program, at first it's quite baffling for parents, but I think once they actually start to understand the meaning behind those and the curriculum, what that offers, it all starts to make sense. But when looking at a school, so Simon, how important is curriculum? When you're comparing it to, say, cost, facilities, do parents need to, is it one of the top factors that they need to consider in the school, and why?
Did you say Simon then? Was that aimed at me?
Sorry, Simon, yes.
Sorry. That's a really good question. And I think that, all of these things come into play, and it does depend on the family as well, where they've been before, because they might want another curriculum that aligns very closely to where they've been before. But, my view is always, I've worked in many different schools, different curricula. My last school was British with an IB diploma. I introduced the IB to a school in Edinburgh. So I think it's really not so much the curriculum, actually, but the culture and ethos in a school, that there's a tremendous rapport between the teachers and the students, that there's personalized education, that it's applied, it's relational, it's purposeful. And then around that, so, I think it was Peter Drucker that said culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's almost the same with curriculum. Culture of a school is really, really important. The curriculum should hang on that, and it should align with your values. My values are that I think there should be a broad education for people aged 16 to 18. I come from a UK background where it's one of the narrowest curricula in the world after the age of 16. You can choose your 3 subjects. I believe that carrying on a language is important after the age of 14, which isn't the case everywhere in the world. And I think the IB, with its humanities and its language and its science and its maths, it's a prescribed framework, but I think it is appealing to me. So it aligns with my values.
Yes.
But in short, in brief, to answer your question, is everything is important within the school context, and cost, obviously, right now during the COVID crisis, could be the key factor. Curriculum should align, but it's the culture and ethos of a school that's most important.
Okay, no, that's interesting. But then from looking at another point, if a parent, say, is coming or maybe returning to their home country, say the UK, for example, is it important that they follow that UK system so that their child can then fit into a school, if they were to relocate? Campbell, what would be your view on that?
I think that, if you're looking as to students going back, I think that's probably an important decision to make. However, there are a number of factors that need to be taken into consideration there, particularly in terms of the students returning. So the age is going to be very important. You can't sort of suddenly switch between the exam years, for example, and choose to go back. There's got to be careful stock taken of the exam boards that have been chosen for those, the subjects that have been chosen. So therefore, the schools that they go back to, those exam boards and those subjects have to be able to align. So I think it needs to be a little bit more than just if you're UK and you're in a UK school here and then you're returning back, then you should do the UK curriculum here. I think there needs to be a few more factors taken into consideration. I think, in terms of parents aligning with the education of their children, it's really important, I believe, for the success of children. There's that match between the parent, the student, and the school. And if parents have had that background, they are familiar with what's going on, then that alignment is easier to happen, I think. And so I think that's important. So there's an understanding on the part of the parents about what their children are experiencing. And I think that when that happens and that alignment can happen between the parent, the student, and the school, then that certainly is beneficial, I believe, for the progress of children.
Yeah, certainly. And it's interesting when you start talking about the qualifications, because it would seem then that perhaps there may be an opportunity to sort of change between curriculum, or if you, based on where your long-term plans are or moving, but it's really those later years that I think maybe parents need to be more mindful of when they could change, during those key years, whether it's GCSE, A-level, or coming up to the diploma program. So, but then when does subject choice become important, Fiona? How does that link in with the curriculum? When do children or the parents need to understand what subjects or specialisms their children need to focus on? So in the UK curriculum, when would that be important?
Well, in the National Curriculum for England, those options really begin at GCSE level. So at the age of 14, there is a specialisation. I think I'd agree with Simon that the majority of great schools will ensure that languages actually stay prevalent, particularly in an international context and setting, from 14 onwards. And you'll find that most of the schools actually in the UAE do try and insist that even at GCSE level, that languages continue. And then, yes, you do go into a narrower framework for A-level at post-16. I think, however, there is I would agree with 80% of what Simon said, but there is a slight difference where I feel that he talked about, the UK curriculum being very narrow. And I think that schools have been very conscious to actually push against that and to ensure that we do put breadth into those choices. So whilst the IB has 6 compulsory subjects post-16, the UK curriculum tends to have 3 or 4 in some cases, but it adds breadth in different ways. So for example, you'll add breadth through the extended project qualification, which is very similar to the extended essay. You will add breadth through things such as work experience, volunteering, Duke of Edinburgh, which very much has a parity with the CAS. So I think whilst subject choice certainly in the English curriculum framework does narrow in terms of specialisation, it doesn't necessarily close doors. And as long as you choose wisely, and as long as you choose with the best careers advice possible, then it doesn't need to narrow those choices. There's an interesting a case study from Harvard University, one of that very small group of Ivy Leagues. And from their admissions criteria, they state the following. They say that the UK A-level and the International Baccalaureate are excellent preparation for study in the US. Harvard does not have a preference amongst these programs. And I think that that's really key, that your Russell Group and your Ivy League universities are indeed your best international universities, whether it's in Europe or the Southern Hemisphere, Australia, South Africa, etc. They tend not to have a preference. It's actually about the student. I completely agree with Simon. It's more to do with the culture, the ethos, what works well for you as a family. And I suppose, as Campbell said, also perhaps, you know, your direction of travel in the future. In terms of that currency. But I would say that the UK curriculum actually has a global currency, really. It's something that's recognised and is established and is well thought of.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for parents to understand, you know, that it isn't, maybe it's not as narrow, you know, and I think some people will look at A-levels and say, well, that's great if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor, or you definitely have a specialism in something. But if I want something broader, you know, it needs to be the IB or the US system, perhaps. And then also looking at, you know, where that will obviously lead your child to and what university they may want to apply to. So then looking at the US system, Yannicka, would that be the case that, you know, should parents expect that if you're studying within that system that your child can only then really apply to a US university?
No, of course not. I mean, I think for anyone who lives in Dubai, the benefit of being here is actually the choice of all these incredible curriculums. And they really do provide all our learners with an amazing opportunity to go out and be successful at university and colleges worldwide. So I think it's very much, my thinking is aligned with what Simon has said to start with, that it's much more a personal choice. It is not necessarily so that one is much better than the other, but one can be much better for an individual child than another curriculum. And I think that's really where parents should be focusing. The better they know their child, the better they will be able to assess what school or what curriculum is going to be most successful. And in schools where there are choices, of course, you have that opportunity to tailor maybe to a family with siblings, where maybe the preference for the family might be one thing, but one child can choose something and another child can choose something else. And we see that in Dubai in particular, where a lot of parents become quite skilled in making the choice, and you will have a number of families that belong to several schools because they literally do look at that best fit for their child. So whether you choose an American AP or high school or IB or UK or National Curriculum of England or the Indian National Curriculum, you can definitely go on and be successful. I think ultimately, if we give great advice to students, we will support them in their journey and make sure that they can attain to the best of their ability. And that's really where the benchmark for their success will be.
I think it's interesting, a couple of points there, obviously mentioning about the, you know, how with siblings, they don't necessarily have to attend the same school and follow the same curriculum, which in your home country, you know, they would automatically tend to do. So I think that's interesting for parents to understand that, you know, children can be very different. I know that from my own experience as a parent, I have two very, very different children, one more academic and one more, you know, a sporty or performing arts type child. So, you know, they may want to follow very different curriculum in that sense. And also, you know, when you talk about there isn't one best curriculum. So, and I think you'd all agree that you're representing different schools, different curricula, but I don't think any one of you would say, no, my curriculum is better than yours. It is just different. So, and then when we're talking about difference, one of those aspects would be, is one curriculum perhaps more rigorous or harder than another? And I think, you know, the IB program has a bit of a reputation for being a particularly, you know, perhaps a more rigorous program than another. But David, would you agree with that? Is that a fair comment? Is that really a system, because of the breadth that it's covering, is that more suited to a much more academic child? or an all-rounder?
Not necessarily, and of course there is also the IB career related program as well, IBCP. I think it is again down to family choice. I think every child can be successful, every child can achieve in all different types of curricula, including that of the IB. The IB does become increasingly rigorous as you move through the years, because you are preparing students for university and for working life. You know, our employers, industries want our students to be critical thinkers, to be problem solvers, to be inquirers, to be internationally minded, tolerant, resilient. And these are all skills that, of course, all the curricula will explore. But I think it's trying to find the balance, isn't it, between the academic rigor and the quality of the assessment and the moderation, but also not losing sight of the fact that these are young children, young people, and we want them to enjoy their learning, enjoy their education, and be very, very successful. Yes. So, you know, I think it's important, going on from what Simon's saying about choice of school, you know, one of the benefits of the IB is a very holistic education. And it is important that we look at curriculum, not just purely in terms of American, IB, British, whatever it might be, but it's all the planned learning in and outside the classroom. So the enrichment, the exciting, fun stuff, the stuff that actually makes our students very curious and want to explore and be trying different things and taking on leadership challenges. So I think every curriculum, if I'm honest, is rigorous. It's really about the support that's in place, the quality of the assessment that's in place, and making sure that, you know, we look at each child individually to personalize the curriculum and the support and indeed the challenge for that child.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting there you mentioned the IBCP as well, which I know, you know, is offered at some schools here in Dubai, which is a much more vocational qualification. And I know, Campbell, you offer the BTEC, which is also a vocational qualification. Later on, we'll have a panel which is discussing in more detail the post-16 choices and looking at vocational and academic options. So I won't go into too much depth there, but it would just be interesting, Campbell, to just understand, you know, once it gets, you're talking about, you know, the different methods of assessment within the IB program, and there's a lot of sort of very inquiry-led and practical assessments. How does that compare to the UK system, where, you know, people would tend to think of your A-level exams and maybe some coursework? Is there that practical element as well? I know, Fiona, you mentioned the extended project qualification as well, which is being introduced and gives students that option too.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of variety there, and as in all curricula, it depends on the subject you're taking as to whether the practical element is there. For example, you can do A-level biology, A-level chemistry, A-level physics. There are still practical elements within those exams that allow students to develop their skills and develop their knowledge around that practical application. So I think it very much comes down to the subject area that is being examined rather than the actual qualification itself as to whether you can say it's more practical or not. Yeah, and you know, as Fiona did mention, that the extended project qualification, which is obviously you know, part of the national qualifications framework, it's considered to be half an A-level, and it really allows students to explore an area of interest, an area of passion, and certainly allows them to broaden their horizons when it comes to their learning. You know, a lot of people have been talking about this, the three subjects in the A-levels, but I mean that's standard, but it's not what needs to happen. I mean, I've been at schools where students have taken 4 or 5 A-levels to broaden their horizons, or to take 4 A-levels and to show their passion and interest, and to display that to universities, have then chosen to take the extended project to broaden and you know, deepen their understanding, but also to show that there is that passion there. And so certainly with that extended project qualification, that does give that breadth and allow that to happen.
Yes, yeah. Okay. And you know, when parents are perhaps looking at the IB system, I know, you know, some schools will offer sort of a combination of, you know, going into whether it's the primary years program, the middle years, and then offering the diploma program known as the full IB program, and some will offer a combination of those. Simon, in your opinion, how important is it to stay with the IB program from the primary years right through to the diploma?
Well, it makes it easier to align, because especially if you've got staff who are trained in the IB, And you're looking at the transitions all the time between, say, grade 5, grade 6, and then between the MYP and DP. So from that angle, purely from professional development and where you're getting your staff from and training them up, it makes it quite nice, and it flows through. As I said, the IB is values-led, approaches to learning, approaches to teaching, the same throughout PYP, MYP, and DP diploma program. And I've worked in schools where there are GCSEs, for example, and then the IB. And you work with it, and it's an interesting link into the IB diploma program. From my angle, I mean, just as a personal comment now, I would say that there will be further changes with GCSE. I think that the UK, and when we talk about the UK, as Fiona rightly said, we're really talking about England and Wales, because Scotland has a far broader system at age 16 to 18, and they do still insist on certain subjects being taken from languages through the way. But yeah, GCSE, it's an interesting question. It'd be good to hear Fiona on this one as well. I found that it can be not a distraction, but you're putting so much focus into a set of exams between 14 and 16 that it takes away from the breadth, from the approaches to learning, from the enrichment as such. I think the UK is studying GCSE right now, and there will be some changes to it. The only other thing I would say with regard to the flow through and the rigor, I agree with David that actually, all of these curricula can be rigorous, can be. It depends what you put into them, what you put around them. The thing is, and I think if we just look at the facts, that the reason that the IB has been considered rigorous, I think, particularly the DP, is that there's been no grade inflation, what people call grade inflation. And unfortunately, A-level has suffered from that, to the extent that in 2010, the UK government had to put an A* in because there were so many people getting A's. And Durham did some research on it, and over 10 years, similar students were increasing by 2 grades from 1988 to 2010. So that's something UK must address. And I think, but that's almost a misnomer. It's not about the rigor, it's just about grade inflation. And the IB hasn't suffered from that. So a 45 is what a 45 was back in 1970 or back in 1980. So I think that's why it's viewed as rigorous by universities as well.
It's interesting talking about grades as well, which leads us on to, obviously each curriculum, each program will ultimately lead to some, an assessment and grades and scores that will be accepted into university. But obviously now more than ever, perhaps, students need to have a wider skill set than, they need to come away from, the end of their school and their education with more than the grades. So what is Fiona, for the UK or the England system, what is that offering in terms of the soft skills, the leadership, the communication skills, and the service side? What can parents expect?
I think, so much of what Simon has said there in terms of the need to realign the curriculums, particularly because of COVID and particularly because of what's happened over the last 12 months is completely true, to make sure that rigor is seen to be fair and to be balanced in terms of examinations. But as a parent of somebody who's just finished year 13 and is now in lockdown in Cardiff in a very small room at university, which is probably half the size of what he's used to here. I think what certainly his education has provided him with are those soft skills. He's resilient. We haven't seen him crumble, even though he's only been to 2 live lectures and everything is online. He does understand how to research and how to ask the right questions. He knows how to find the right resources, and he's adaptable in terms of that. I believe he's values driven, mainly because of, I suppose, how we've brought him up at home as a parent, but also how his school have dealt with that as an organisation here. So I think that the concepts of skills acquisition inquiry, which people often immediately just associate with the IB, because I think the IB articulate them incredibly well. I think the English system hasn't articulated those same skills, but I think they're now intrinsic into everything that we do. We're all on a drive and a road to make sure that we're developing the best learners possible, so that when they are 25, 35, 45, they're able to make the right life choices. We're not just preparing children to come out of an exam system at 18. We're all in the job of creating great adults. So I think there's what the British system hasn't done is perhaps articulated it very well, but it certainly is part and parcel of what we do every day in terms of widening the learner profile of our young people and making sure that, that learner profile is as strong as it might be in any other curriculum model.
Yes, yeah. All right, so I mean, I think we could talk for hours about this subject because there's so much to do with curriculum, and unfortunately, we will have to sort of wrap up in a bit. But what I do want to make time for is some questions from the attendees here today, from some parents. So if I can just have a quick look through, I have a question here from Lana, who's asking if I could ask David, perhaps direct this one to you. What's the difference between being an authorized IB school and a candidate IB school? Does it need to be an authorized school here in Dubai?
Well, the reality is that schools start as candidate schools, and then they have to go through a rigorous process of authorization to make sure that they have all of not just the structure and the organization, but all the teaching, the resources, the assessment, everything that meets the high IB standards are in place so that parents and students can be confident that that school is delivering a high quality IB education in line with IB principles and standards. So all schools will start as a candidate school, and obviously we've gone through that authorization process, and we're now an authorized IB World school, having previously been a candidate school.
Okay, thank you, Fede. Hopefully that answers your question there, Lana. We've had a few questions coming in which are looking at the best curriculum for children with special educational needs. Harsh is asking which curriculum would be better for a child with learning difficulties. Yannicka, could you respond to that?
Yes, I think again that is probably also a very individual, a very individual assessment. Maybe not so much based on the curriculum itself, but and it all depends on the age of the child. So if we're talking about very young children, parents should really look at the overall resources in the school and the ability the school will have to personalize the learning. And then the more we know about the student, of course, the more one will be able to direct a student in making the right kind of choice when a student is old enough to really be in that critical age where the ultimate kind of exam-oriented choice will matter. So and at that point, yes, we might be able to give some more quality answers to whether this curriculum over that curriculum might be a better fit for the individual. But again, I think this is very, very much a personal assessment that parents should make together with the school, and look more holistically at all the offerings in the school and all the opportunities that a child will have to thrive, maybe also outside the classroom. What other support structure is in place? Is well-being a focus? Is there a good support for learning department in the school with a lot of resources? So, I would say it's hard to identify a curriculum fit. It again is very much an individual assessment of the right fit for the child.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I think, as you refer to there, that's when it comes into play that you really need to go and visit the school as well, which is, one of the key things we would encourage all parents to do when they're looking at that, and understand, like, Simon and many of you have talked about today as well, it's being the value and the culture that's linked into that curriculum. So it's not, it's about more than just sort of reading it on paper and understanding, the different stages of a curriculum. It's about feeling it in that school presence too. But I'm afraid we're running out of time, so we're going to have to finish the questions there. But what I would say is to anybody who's attending here today, if you do have more questions that you would like to ask our panelists from their schools, please go and visit their stands. today live at the Which School Show, and over the next couple of weeks as well, you'll be able to access that and come back for more information. And whichschooladvisor.com and schoolscompared.com, we also have stands here today, and we're ready and waiting to answer your questions about curriculum and other issues. But for now, I think I'd like to just say a huge thank you to all our panelists who've joined us today. So we have David Hudson, the head of school at Dwight School, Fiona Cottam, the principal at Heartland International School, Yannicka Arnes, the school director at Universal American School, Simon Herbert, the head of school and CEO at GEMS International School, and Campbell Douglas, the principal and CEO at GEMS Wellington Academy, Al Kale.